Well, welcome to the October 18th, 2022 Notary Governance meeting. Really excited to have you here. It's been a really long time since I've kicked off one of these myself. I know that we usually get K-Ray's high quality radio presenter voice, which we're all sorely missing in the morning, and you're stuck with me croaking instead. So I apologize. We've got a pretty packed agenda where we'll be focusing on several things, including notary elections, for the most part, but then also covering open topics and issues. So without further ado, I'd love to get started. Great to see all of you here. Thank you for making the time. As usual, just friendly hello from the Notary Governance and FIL Plus Governance team. For those of you that haven't been here before, my name is Deep. I work on generally thinking about data cap flow and ways in which we can improve client verification processes. We also have Galen, who works on large-scale data cap allocations, K-Ray, who's usually here running the call, supporting notaries and the rest of the community, RG, who runs trust and transparency stuff, Phil, focusing on notary tooling, and Simon focusing on the client onboarding path and generally how clients get to data cap. And so if you have any questions about these topics, feel free to reach out to any of us. You can find us on Slack, you can find us here, but just in general, we're here to support whatever your questions might be and ensure that you have the information you need to be successful in this program. And if you're here also for the first time, it would be awesome if you could just edit your Zoom name. I see a couple in here that it's like you might be carrying over a name from a different meeting. But Jazz, thank you for doing this. Tom, thank you for doing this. It'd be really great if you could edit your actual Zoom name to just say the organization that you're the notary for, or if you're a notary on your own, then just include your actual name. And that way we can track down and see who's here, as well as it helps when you're asking questions and provides context for others in the room. And so the way you do that is down here. Basically, you can just click on your little three dots that you see at the top right when you hover on the right where the participants are, and you can click to rename. If you have any questions about that, please let us know as well. We'd love to enable this so that we can get efficient participation and ensure everybody knows where they're coming from. And last but not least, in terms of housekeeping to kick this thing off, there's the participation form for today. This is as usual. I would love if you could fill this out. Everybody here, we'll send this link out again at the end. I know a couple of people just joined, so I'm going to drop it in chat again. The intent behind this is one of the few things that K-Ray is currently doing to continue to track general participation of notaries across different mechanisms. So this includes, of course, looking at your overall responsiveness in GitHub and in Slack, but then also whether or not you're able to make it to governance calls and how you're participating. So please fill this out. If you have any questions about this, also let us know, but ideally this should be pretty simple. Okay, with that, I'm going to move us into the notary elections portion of the call. I think this will be where we'll spend a majority of the time. And I think this is the topic that most people are interested in hearing about. Just so you folks are aware, the intent behind today's call is to have clarity on both the process in terms of the dates and the timeline, as well as clarity on the proposals being put forth on how the process may change this time around. And so this is specifically around what are we expecting could be different, and we are writing up proposals to change every part of it technically, other than the actual scoring mechanism and the data cap granting mechanism. But hopefully stuff that feels natural is in line with the evolution of the program, because as you know, the election process is a very good touch point effectively for us to rejigger things, to audit things, make sure stuff is still at the right quality, as well as in line with where the rest of the ecosystem is at. And so we'll be proposing a couple of changes to the application template, to the notary rubric, just to ensure that we're continuing to evolve as sort of we progress. One of the big topics that came up in this vein in the last call was around introducing tiers of notaries. So having different types of tiers, where it might be that we have a community-oriented notary or an LDN notary or somebody that can also grant data cap directly. We did a little bit of thinking there and a little research too, and came up with some proposals for that. And so we'll chat through that too. But first, I want to talk about generally, the goals and the principles for notaries as well as for the program overall. I think there's a couple of things that come to mind. Ultimately, though, the goal is that all of these accrue towards ensuring that Filecoin is actually a useful storage network. So specifically, there's this aspect of community governance, which is you're showing up to calls like this, you're participating in discussions in GitHub or in Slack, where you're helping change the program, evolve the program, meet the needs of specific cases that we learn about as the ecosystem continues to grow. It's an aspect of transparency and accountability. Each of you that applied to be a notary that's here today or is watching this recording, you filled out a pretty lengthy application, part of which included how are you actually going to score applicants, and then how are you going to track when you've given data cap to clients. And that's one sliver sort of this piece. There's an element of ensuring that there's continued trust being earned and there's performance over time being measured. That's where some of the dashboards kick in, and the leaderboard that's been a bit of a work in progress. Thanks to Alex, we've been able to get it up the ground. We have a little bit more to do there for sure. There's this angle on wanting to ensure that the people that are here and are serving in that leveraged position of power with the ability to have impactful alterations or changes to the ecosystem. Like, you play a really important role here as a notary. I think it's a very key stakeholder to sort of unblocking deal making and actual value proposition of Filecoin, and ensuring that we're setting up the network for success, both by picking individuals, but then also distributing individuals and distributing from the perspective of creating like ideally a proper decentralization layer, whether that's ideological, philosophical, geographical, across all these slices. And so we often look at where are people applying from? Where are they going to be serving as a notary for? What regions do they have relative expertise in? Where can they perform their duty as effectively as possible? And it helps a lot because that's where you understand cultural nuances, you understand language. Like, we have that case of Project Beacon, which is finally issuing data cap. We have a notary called Eric, who was able to understand the needs of the client and represent the client well, even when the client needed to go on leave, which helps a lot. Like, when you're able to build those stronger relationships and ensure that as a notary, you're able to do, serve the community, serve the network, and ensure that we're moving and progressing in the right direction overall. And ultimately, there's this last bit that is a little underexplored, but is finally getting there with regards to handling disputes and audits, which is having a low friction process and hopefully a mechanism by which we can actually more effectively and efficiently make decisions in cases where we think there might be abuse of the program or profiteering of the program. And ultimately, all of these things accrue towards this ultimate goal of actually having a useful storage network. Before I hop on, because I wanted to set this out as like the stage of how we'd talk about some of the changes that we're proposing, I wanted to ask if there's any questions on this. Okay, I'm going to assume none for now. If you have anything, drop them in the chat. We got Phil, RG, and others that can help you, or I'll bring it up towards the later stages of the call. So the first thing I want to talk about is around this concept of engagement in program underneath this like SLA bucket that was introduced at the previous round of elections. And I'm doing this on behalf of KRA. He's proposing a couple of changes to how we measure this and how we score this. He'll be here at the afternoon call today. For those of you that are there for the second one, you'll be able to hear from him live, and I'm confident he'll do a much better job representing what he's proposing than I will, but I'm going to give it a shot. RG, Phil, if you have anything you guys want to add, I would love if you interrupt me or add after I'm done. From my understanding, effectively, the main crux of the issue is that when we introduced this metric, it was introduced using just time as the primary method of measurement for engagement in the program. So specifically, instead of figuring out in what ways somebody was engaged, it was just, can you be engaged for a certain amount of hours? And while this is a decent proxy for what you might do with those hours, it's really, really difficult to actually follow up on that. And a good example, this is somebody may not be able to make it to the governance call, but may have been able to watch the recording, and we wouldn't have known that. And there's no way for us to know that and count that towards, hey, like, yes, this person's actually making time. Or on the other end, there's like this aspect of, are you available to sign applications at a certain point in time? Time zones get in the way, other duties get in the way. So it's really hard to consistently chase this down. And instead, I think what KRA is proposing is that currently we feel super biased towards whether or not you're in the call. And if you're not in the call, then are you actually responsive in Slack? And if you're not responsive in Slack, are you in GitHub and you talking in GitHub discussions or sharing your thoughts on GitHub issues? And that's pretty much what we have. And that none of those really directly, I mean, there's correlation with time, but there's no way to say that time would have been the best way to actually measure your impact there. And so Kerry is proposing that we actually move towards measuring things that we can actually even quantitatively measure that are more directly relevant when it comes to actual engagement in the program. And so specifically, that means, are you actually allocating data cap? Are you coming to these governance calls? Not because you spent a certain amount of hours in a week doing it, but like, did you actually show up? And are you looking at proposals for changes to the program? Are you commenting? Are you writing your proposals? Are you sharing or voting or whatever the mechanisms may be? And are you responsive both to clients as well as to us? And are you helping us sort of improve the software and the tooling so that we can continue to move the program upwards and make it more and more useful over time? And so with that, Kira is proposing a new set of levels effectively. So just to go back for a second, this was less than 30 minutes for L1, less than 1 hour for L2, less than 4 hours for L3, less than 8 hours for L4, greater than 8 hours for L5. And just as a reminder for those of you, or if you've never been through the notary application process, these L's effectively come in as a numerical score. So this would score as a 1, as a 2, as a 3, as a 4, as a 5. And then this goes into a formula, and you can read about that. We can link you to that. But this goes into a formula effectively where this is one component of many components, but you want your score to be as high as possible. And so realistically, the requirements for what is considered the level 5 should be significantly higher than what is considered in level 1, and it should scale upwards. So with that in mind, this is the set that Kira is initially putting forward. You can see the details of this in issue number 630 in the Notary Governance repo. I'm just going to talk through this though, just so you're aware. Okay, so at the baseline level, Kira is proposing that a notary should attend 1 governance call in a month. Typically there's 2, sometimes there's 3. They respond to Slack inquiries within 5 days, and they vote or comment or propose 1 proposal per month. And this is basically that, you're hopping into GitHub, you're looking at what's open, you're responsive to people on Slack within the week, and you're coming to at least 1 governance call. Scaling up from that, what's being added is that you're slightly more responsive on Slack. So this is for folks that are able to make it into the Filecoin Slack more regularly, either as part of their business or because they're able to make the time for it. And you also participate in 1 working group. So some of you may have seen the Trust and Transparency working group spin up with RG a couple of weeks ago. Before that, KZ, who's also in the call, spun up the Enterprise FIL Plus working group. We are currently thinking of several more that we're going to pitch to you all at the FIL Lisbon event. And so there should be ample opportunity here. But the idea is effectively that if you're applying to be a notary, there are probably areas that you have a lot of ideas on that we could use to improve the program, improve the experience for people participating. And so we'd love to have you engaged in that more specific, more focused capacity, rather than just coming to this call and sort of like listening to everything that's happening all at once and be forced to drink from this fire hose. So up from the 2nd level to the 3rd level, there's a couple of new things here. So first things for sure to call out is that this 1 governance call a month becomes a 2 governance calls a month. So you're coming to nearly every governance call ideally. Now, just to be clear, you have actually twice as many as I said you did, because we're doing 2 each time that we do them. So hopefully you can make it at least one of those 2, because they're pretty disparate in terms of the time. I think they're going to be offset by nearly 10 hours or so. So hopefully that works for most people. I think we've been experimenting with the times, and we got some good data over the last month or 2, which has led us to reschedule the 2nd call again, but hopefully to a time now that works for everybody. If this one doesn't, and this is me, for those of you watching the recording, in the first session for October 18th. So you're attending 2 governance calls a month. You've got the same stuff below that, but there's something new here, which is maintaining and ranking the leaderboard in the top 25% of notaries. So for those of you that are not aware, there's a notary leaderboard that we've been working on with Alex's help initially. And the intent is to get to, let me make sure I pull this up, to using this effectively as a way to track notary's success effectively, right? And so you have a view where you're looking at each notary, you're seeing the organization they're at, their address. I think we've shared this on a call before, so I'm not going to go into this too deeply, but the intent is we're tracking notary activity and are able to say, look, like these are the notaries that are able to be super responsive. And the driving metric really is time to data cap here, which is how are people actually able to get to that. And so the reason this comes up now is because Gary is making the case where a notary that's claiming to get to this third level really wants to make a concerted effort to be in the top quarter of notaries when it comes to time to data cap. And you'll see that this continues to increase. A couple of callouts also worth thinking about if you're listening to this and you're thinking about applying to be a notary. Time to data cap is our measure of how long it takes for a client to go from being in the state where they're eligible and requesting data cap to actually getting data cap on an address that they can then use to go make deals on the network. And so, well, that's one. And then the second thing I wanted to add is that we're currently at about 53, no, we're actually higher than that now, but somewhere between 50 and 60 semi-active to very active notaries in the FIL Plus ecosystem. With the new round of elections, I expect we'll slightly increase that as well. And so that percentage impact, will change depending on how many people, like what your denominator actually is, as well as, we may need to tune that based on the feedback that we get from you. For the score of 4, the differences are that you're further targeting an even more aggressive number for how and where you want to be in that leaderboard, and you are participating in more than one working group. And the intent here is that, hey, like you're joining FIL Plus, you're joining this community, this is like a big part of your work, or it is a substantive part of your volunteer time in life. This is a very interesting project to you to the point where you want to influence multiple different initiatives within it. And so that's really where you want to take on like more of an active leadership as position. And so you're joining more than one working group, you're influencing decision making and thinking in more than one place. And then up from there to the 5th score is to get effectively the top handful of notaries that are participating and being hyper responsive effectively on all the conversations that are happening. And so in the past, what we saw in the previous election cycle with sort of these numbers is that people that were doing this as part of their work immediately put themselves at the 5th bucket, and people that were doing this as part of volunteer time would put themselves in the 2nd or the 3rd bucket most often, and that created like an interesting rift where it was, hey, like it's not actually about whether or not you're spending that time, and it's very difficult to track whether you are. So it feels unfair to reward something when it's very difficult to measure. This gives us the opportunity to get like much more precise with how and what we want to track, but it also creates like, I think, a clearer bound for people to opt around like what they want to. So this is like really be honest about where you think you'd like to get to and what makes sense for your role. And let's use that instead of just some arbitrary metric of time spent in the program. What are thoughts on this? Or RG, Phil, is there anything you wanted to add?
I think it's good.
Yeah, I think this is good. Nothing specific on my side either.
Just a reminder to the community that this is a proposal. This is not decided on. If you have thoughts on this or you feel strongly about aspects of this, please join us in the conversation at 6:30. It would be great to hear what folks are thinking and ways in which we can improve this further. Cool. I see some support in the chat. Thank you, Carolina. Okay. I got 2 sips of my drink in, so that's my standard 2-sip break, which means we're giving you enough time if you want to react right now. Of course, those of you watching the recording, I'm sorry I can't see your reaction, but please join us in the conversation instead, so we can track down what's happening and make sure your voice is heard in GitHub. Okay, so talking about the application process a little bit and sort of what some of the changes that may come that way. First things first, the way notary applications actually work are along the lines of actually, clicking into notary governance, go to the issue and creating an application. And so it's just a new issue that would be created in the repo. Now, the request that we have is please do not submit your application yet. And the reason for this is the proposals open on changing the actual application. Like, for example, if 630 were to go through, we would need to change the template to reflect that, hey, like somebody needs to opt into a level. We have no way to know otherwise. And so that's obviously not part of the application template today, because this is a new construct that's being added in. And so unless you are ready to go back and edit your application in the future, once everything is locked in, so after November 1st, just don't open an application. I'm already seeing a bunch of applications come in. That's awesome. Great to see the proactiveness. Just know that the expectation is that you will have to then port that application to the new format for it to be considered valid. With that in mind, I'm probably going to pass this on to Phil, because I think you've heard my voice for a little bit too long now in a single stretch. Phil, do you want to talk through the set of proposals that we'd like to make to the template itself?
Yep. Hi, guys. So my name is Philip. I'm a relatively new face here. So for those of you who did not come to the last governance call, I'm going to quickly reintroduce myself. I'm Philip, new TPM at FIL Plus. I'll be handling notary toolings and notary incentives. I want to evolve the notary process. So going forward, as a first step, the FIL Plus team and I have been discussing on new changes. We want to use this opportunity to create new changes for the template for the next election. So when people apply to this next election, they will be using this template instead of the old template with a few changes. So the motivation of these changes, there are a few things. We wanted to improve the efficiency of the application. So we realized that in the old application, there are a lot of questions that didn't give us any data or were not useful at all. So we removed those questions. We also want to set up for future evolution of the notary process and rules. Because of that, we need to collect more data and also build trust in the notary system. So that's where we added new questions. And lastly, we did some housekeeping by clarifying some words and also changing some terminology and to make it more consistent. So going on to like the specific changes, Deep, could you possibly pull up the GitHub issue? Deep. All right. Anyway, going into specific changes, the biggest change is that we've added 3 new questions. Firstly, to apply, we asked you to provide your country of operation because we believe that in the future we might use that to align notaries in similar countries to clients in similar countries, just because it's a smoother process that way. Secondly, we added another question asking, there you go.
I'm just going to pull this up for you so that we can just walk through. Is that okay?
That's what I wanted to do.
Sorry, let's do this.
All right. So firstly, there's a new country of operations question that basically asks where your country of operations is. That's useful for us because later on when we want to, as the notary process grows, there will be many clients from different countries, and we want to align notaries within the same country with clients in the same country. So then the due diligence process and the LDN process can all go much smoother. A few clarifying things: we changed GCN to GCR, Greater China Region. That's because before we said Greater China Region, but then we said GCN instead. So just to like clarify things, we changed it to GCR. We fixed the scaling. This should be in a change in the later rubric, but since because of this new modification that we had before to cap all direct allocations to 1 pip, we changed and we scaled the direct allocation to 10 TIBs to 1 pip. This will be clarified later on in another issue for the rubrics changes. In terms of question modifications, there are this question about use cases is changed based on looking at our previous applicants. We looked at the previous applicants from the last notary election, and we saw what your most common use cases are, and then we changed the options to reflect those. We also introduced a new question asking if you are applying on behalf of your organization. That being said, like if you are in a certain organization, let's say Netflix, and you move to another company, are you gonna bring this operation with you, or is the notary operation gonna stay within the company and move hands to someone else in the company? And then other than that, a few housekeeping things changed, like wording, and then some clarifying things. One big question, it's a disclosure question that we have, is how did you acquire, how much stake did you acquire, and how did you acquire that FIL? I think this question just builds trust within the notary system, and that's why it's there. We want to know basically how you acquire your FIL, and I think because we think that is some important data for us to evolve the system in the future. And then other than that, there's like individual reputation. We deleted some questions, so we deleted the diversity and decentralization section because we thought that it didn't provide us any information. Some clarifications on the allocation plan question to give it more context. In terms of the track record, we also deleted that question because we could track that from the dashboards. And finally, we added a new disclosure section with only one question, and that is to ask whether you have any relations to other organizations or other notaries in the system, because we also think that would be useful information going forward. And with that, I think that's most of the changes. If you have any issues or comments or thoughts or remarks, feel free to either comment in chat right now, comment in the governance call later, directly contact me, because I'll be the person responsible for this. And also you can comment in this GitHub issue 628. Going forward, there's by tomorrow, we'll also have another issue to have a detailed description of the changes we are going to do to the rubric. And yeah, so I think that is all. Is there anything else that needs to be added?
No, that's great. Thank you, Phil. I'm just sharing a link to the actual markdown changes too, that I had. So if somebody wants to see what the template would actually look and feel like as a way, you can click into this. I'll send a link exactly to this actually. And so you can see here what the diff looks like. And this helps really clarify what the changes are. And as you can see, not that many. Ultimately, I think we got to a pretty good place with the application template in the previous cycle, but these are very, very useful additions to the application template and should help streamline the process even further. Any immediate questions for Phil on this, or just in general before we continue?
Hey, Deep, CB here. I was just wondering, is there more clarification on, the definition of relationship for question 8?
Yeah, I think the short version of that is if required, I think we should definitely add it in. But the reality is we need to know ideally any kind of like relationship. If we were forced to be very precise with it, it would probably be financial interest, I think, CB. Because what we're really looking for is we're looking for cases where we want to minimize the ability for a single organization to influence like large amounts of data cap moving, right? In an effort to like decentralize the decision making. So for example, if you've got one company that has like, let's say 4 wholly owned subsidiaries or significantly owned subsidiaries, or heck, even partially invested in companies, if that company can exert control over those 4 and each of those 4 apply to be a notary, then that's all you need to get DataCat moving in a large data set application. And that to us is a bit of a flag, not because those people should not have been notaries, because it's completely reasonable for them to have been notaries, but more from the angle of, hey, if one of them is signing, maybe the other signature for that multi-sig approval should come from somebody who's not being influenced or not in the same sort of group of entities that have a relationship or shared stake.
Yeah, okay, absolutely agree. Yeah,
That's sort of where the motivation is.
transparency would help.
Sorry, you cut out briefly for me. Can you say that again, CB? Oh, I hope I'm not gone. Can folks hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. CB, I think we lost you for the last part of what you said. If you want to just drop it in chat, that would be great. Cool. I think we should proceed. We're at 35 minutes and we still have some stuff to get through. Okay, and so just continuing down the process, so we've talked a little bit about like some of the changes that might come to the actual application template. Another example of change would be like this. So if you look at 630, it's actually similar to 628 and proposes changes to template and rubric in the future. But the ideal thing that you need to leave this call with is like, hey, if I'm going to submit an application to be a notary, I'm going to be scored via this rubric. This rubric is actually open source. Anybody can propose changes to it. So if you're an interested community member, you should look at the rubric and see if the takeaways that you have on how you're writing your application for sure. You can always make a copy of it in Google Sheets and mess around with it and see like, what you might score as. But the other thing you should know is if you see things in there that could be improved or edited, we'd love to get proposals from you in the next week or so we can continue to make those modifications. The changes to the application template are much more crucial in the next 2 weeks because we want to unblock that to ensure that people can actually apply by November 1st. However, that also constrains changes to the rubric, right? We can't go and make a modification to the rubric that doesn't align with what is being collected in the application. And so highly recommend that we sort of iterate on these somewhat in parallel. So a great opportunity for you to see what that actually looks like. And then last and certainly not least, I'm going to talk a little bit about the timeline, and then we'll come back to the FAQ. For the timeline, today we're at the 18th of November governance call. We've just gone over the process. We'll cover some questions that we know we're anticipating. On October 30th, for those of you that are going to be in Lisbon, we'll be having a mini FIL Plus day, actually. We're in the process of finalizing the details. I'll share more about that at the end of this call. But we'll cover the process again and take Q&A live and walk through whatever changes at that point in time are being merged into the process. So if you're going to be there or you're able to join us live through a live stream, that's where we'll sort of talk through the final processes, the final sort of way forward. And then post that a day or two later, we're planning to open up the actual application. So this is where you want to come to that call, ask all your questions about the process, and then apply to become a notary on November 1st. If you've already applied to be a notary, then you want to come to October 30th because you'll need to know what you need to change in your application to get it to comply with the new template. So we leave applications open for a period of 2 weeks from 1st to the 16th, do an initial round of scoring and follow up between the 16th and the 9th. So as you know, ideally we like to do these things in 1 week, or in this case, there's a Thanksgiving in the US. And so we're losing a week in between, but we want feedback on the scoring. So specifically, we're looking for this to turn into a follow-up and discussion. And we will come to you with initial scoring proposed. And the expectation is that you as a notary are reviewing our scoring and agreeing or disagreeing with it and asking us to change it based on how you feel is fair. And you're welcome to look at other people's initial scores and like help us audit the process and make sure it's consistent across the board. The intent is to get to the final set of new notaries by December 9th. And then spend the last couple of weeks before people leave for the holidays in the winter, finalizing onboarding and making sure everything is good to go. So let's talk about some questions that we get. We always get these two questions. Do existing notaries have to reapply? So it's highly, highly, highly recommended that you reapply. This is because of a couple of reasons. Number one, the template itself is changing, right? Like if any of these proposals go through, there's substantial changes to like how the template will change, which then means that you're much better off in a future rubric having scored on the updated template. It will be helpful for you as well from a future standpoint, because I'm just going to give the example of LDN v3, right? when we pushed LDN v3 to actually merge with the rest of how the process works, one thing that was called out was that it's the notary said that had recently been elected that was eligible. And so there was a separate proposal that was needed for notaries that had applied in the past but had not reapplied in the previous round. And because that was sort of the default understanding proposed in the initial issue from Galen, those notaries actually were not allowed to join the multisig. And actually, to this day, are not part of that multisig because of the back and forth on what does it mean to be an active notary. And so if you're interested in continuing to be an active player in the community and you want to participate in new initiatives and efforts, I think you should just assume that you should apply to be a notary again. There's almost no downside, and a lot of the hard questions or the longer questions are the same. And so the process should be relatively painless for you. So that brings me to the second question, which is, if you've already submitted an application in GitHub, will I need to submit an update? And the answer is yes. You should either reuse it and update it to the new template, or just make a new issue and close out the previous one and copy over the answers to the questions that are the same. We will not be scoring applications that are not on the latest template, and the latest template will only be locked around October 30th to November 1st. And so there is a clear expectation that you are responsible for ensuring that your application complies with the latest template. If anybody has issues with this or is unable to do this, like say you're on vacation from October 30th to November 16th, and absolutely cannot write an application during that time, please reach out to K-Ray. We will come up with a backup plan that will work. Are there any questions on this or the timeline? Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much. Looking forward to hearing, your thoughts on the things that have been proposed here. Please join us in the conversation on GitHub. So issue 628, issue 630. I'm sure there will be more. Keep an eye out for that. We'll use Slack to communicate as well as the GitHub discussion on the actual issue itself. With that, I'd like to pivot to a new proposal that was filed by Kevin. KZ, if you're around, do you want to chat us through 625?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So this is coming from just sort of a lot of feedback in the community about the LDN application. Currently, we ask applicants their region, but we'd actually like to know more specifically the country and also the industry. Not that you can't find that information by looking through the application, but it just makes it easier from a review perspective for notaries and also from a metadata perspective for those looking at all applications collectively. We can start to organize by industry and country. It sort of helps. So this will just be a quick change, removing the region question and adding a country and an industry drop-down question to the application.
Nice.
Yeah. Any questions or thoughts?
I think this change is very in line with what we've been thinking about with improving the notary process too, right? Like having country level fidelity enables much better matchmaking. And part of why region was introduced to begin with was because we were a very small community, right? There were like 11 notaries that were participating the first time we did this. And dividing things up based on country would just not make sense. And we're getting to the point where we're 60 plus folks. We're running a bunch of different working groups, different efforts. The number of clients applying for data cap have gone from being in the tens to being in the thousands. And so changes like this help with dividing, breaking down, looking at decentralization, looking at support in different regions, figuring out where the gaps really are when it comes to ensuring that this network actually serves the world and serves use cases across the world. And so I think it's a really great change. I think my question to you, KZ, would be on the industry side of things. How do you propose this gets maintained in the future? Is this something that you think this is good enough for the time being, or are you expecting to make changes? Because it'll be hard to retroactively get people to edit their applications. And so we'll just have to assume that this is good enough and we can continue to iterate, but you won't get that level of quality into the past, if that makes sense. Is that something we're fine with?
That's a good point. Honestly, I didn't think that deep into it. So if people have recommendations for other categories, or if we want to rethink this, we should do it, yeah, before we make the change. But this was taken from another industry drop-down list that I saw that I thought made sense. Happy to, yeah, if anyone has ideas for specific categories or any changes, we should make those. Not a problem.
Cool. At first glance, it looks relatively comprehensive. I think the only thing that might be missing here is like government. Unless I'm missing, I have missed something.
Yeah.
Maybe that
yeah.
falls under not for profit. Maybe worth explicitly putting that in there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and maybe we need a ad for like native crypto project.
I think that would default to fall under IT and technology. But if we want to break that out, like I think that's a good idea. Like maybe we put like Web3/crypto as its own like category.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. I know Simon's been doing some thinking about this one as well. Simon, anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think I can work with KZ on this, and we can just kind of expand that as well. But I think as of now, nothing.
Cool. Okay, anything else? Thanks for sharing, Kobe. Other notaries in the chat, like we've got some here that have seen a lot of different clients come through. If you see anything missing, if you have any suggestions, I shared the link. I'm going to do it again. 625. All right, thank you, KZ. I think it'd be really great if we could, if we could move on this one a little bit quickly. I already see a decent amount of support in the issue, and you got a lot of thumbs. It seems relatively non-controversial, so let's see what we can do to get this one.
Great, thanks.
Cool, thank you so much. Okay, and then last and certainly not least in terms of content that we wanted to make sure we got to today, there's the actual conference happening. So for those of you that aren't aware, this is the website. I'm going to drop this in the chat. So this is tracking all of this stuff happening in Lisbon over the next 2 weeks. For those of you that are going to be there, please let us know. Really would look forward to seeing you. If there's enough of us there, I think we should really explore having an event outside of the formal FIL Plus day, like just to get together more socially as well. But yeah, definitely check this out. And I think there was a question in the chat. Eric, you'd mentioned if you can't make it in person, right? How can you tune in? And I think the answer to that is you see this live button here. I think for some of these, there's like a clear intent to live stream them. I don't think the others have actually updated this about themselves. So there's definitely a few more that should have that coming soon. So you can see this one has it, but there's several more of these events that are planning to be streamed. And so for those ones, the expectation is that the content would actually be shared live. Now, I know you had a specific question, Eric, on Crypto Econ Day. I don't think we have anybody from the Crypto Econ team on the call right now, but I know CB works relatively closely with that team. CB, on the off chance, are you aware if they'll be streaming that or just recording it or anything? If you're participating this time?
I will be participating. I'm not sure if they're recording. I can quickly ask them and then I'll get back to Eric offline.
That sounds, we'd really appreciate it. If you can just do that and dump it in the FIL Plus channel so people are aware in case there are others that are following along, that'd be really great.
All right.
Okay, thanks, CB. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Yep. Yeah, I think it'd be really good to know because I think a lot of people are interested in that one. And then, as I was mentioning earlier, we have an intent on this day, which will be Sunday, October 30th, 9 a.m. local time to 1 p.m. local time. It's not on here yet. We'll get it on here probably today or tomorrow to have like, FIL Plus at FIL Lisbon. And so the intent there is similar to what we have done in the past. If you were there for our events in Austin or live streamed on Zoom, we'd like to have a session where we cover updates to the program, a good chance for people to connect in person and generally meet up, but then also talk through, open discussions, open complexities, and definitely spend some time discussing the notary election process. And so we'd love to see you there in person on October 30th if you're able to make it. And then Eric and others, I think we will make a disproportionate effort to ensure that we will live stream our stuff. So if you're not able to make it in person, I think we'll make sure that you're able to connect remotely too. Awesome. Okay, yes. Looking forward to seeing you all in person as well. Charles, I think you're going to be doing a panel at FIL Lisbon as well, right? On November 1st or October 31st?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's October 31st. So other than this October 30th event, there's also the actual main stage for FIL Lisbon. And so there will be a moderated panel. I think, Charles, it'll be you and me at least, and maybe a couple other people.
Okay.
And so I think we'll be chatting about generally the current value proposition of Filecoin Plus, how it evolves, and Charles will be representing sort of the stakeholder voice of the notary. And so the intent is, well, not just notary, actually, not notary as well as a client proxy and a deal aggregator. So we're looking forward to hearing multiple sort of perspectives in talking through the influence of the FIL Plus program, what it enables, and how we think it needs to continue evolving. And so that will happen at the main stage. I think they're still waiting to finalize that schedule, but this is a link to that schedule whenever it does come, and you can use this to sort of share what you're doing and where you'll be over the course of that time. All right, any questions on this?
Just a quick question. Is there any way to add that into the schedule on Google Calendar or something like that?
Yeah, so there is. That's a really good question. So there's this thing called Shed or Sked.
Okay.
This is an app that lets you sort of customize, like so you sign in, and then you can pick the ones that you want, and then you can sync it to your calendar.
Okay. Can you send us the link?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I haven't done this myself, but in seeing this right now, I think I'll go do this myself probably today. And then I think I can actually, we might be able to share schedules with each other with this as well. Like we might be able to give, like I might be able to share where I will be or something like that, which could also be good if you want to share your schedules with other people in the community. Cool. And if you haven't registered already, I'm dropping that in chat too, because these are going to close in pretty quickly. I'm already seeing a lot of events heading towards waitlisting. And so if you haven't signed up, please sign up as soon as you can. I would absolutely hate for you to be there and not be able to make it. And so if you're already aware that you're coming to Lisbon, please sign up. And that applies to all of these events. This is a distributed and decentralized conference. For each of these, there's a separate website. There's a intent that you're going to be signing up to participate for each of these. So you can, click through the website and, for example, get tickets here, or click through here, website, and then down here, there should be registration. So please register for these events if you're going to be there. Looking forward to seeing you all. All right. I know we had one client that we were looking at. Let me see if I can get there. Is the representative from Xingqi Media available on the call today by any chance? I could. I don't know if this audio is going to come through. Yeah, let's do this. I'll share their video. That way you guys can see what they've submitted. And we can see if we have any questions for them.
We can also, we can just play the video and then move the conversation to the Trust and Transparency Working Group.
Sounds good.
Hello, everyone. This is Xingqi Media, which is...
Can you hear the audio, by the way?
Yes.
Cool. Thank you, RG.
Committed to becoming the most professional and high-quality video content production company. There are 5 business segments in there. 1, film, TV, play investment and post-production. 2, post-production training, short video production for TikTok. 3, investment and production of TV programs. 4, post-production of variety show. And last, music arrangement and composition services, film and television dubbing, and program mixing. In this decade, there were 115 cooperation projects between Xinchi Media and TV stations, and then 87 cooperation projects with network platforms, which are very rare in China. There are 5 development teams, 6 project production teams, and 12 executive director teams. Through long-term project practical experience, the team now has professional programs, content, R&D capability, and rich project execution and production experience. The programs produced by Xinchi Media have more than 50 billion hits in Chinese internet. As the main business segment of Xinchi Media, the company is located in Beijing and Changsha. More than 170 content producers have the ability and the quality to produce the 5 S-level variety shows at the same time. There are 5 shows on 10 billion playback volume data set, including Running Man China, Use With You, Where Are We Going, Dad? The Story in China, Nation's Greatest Treasures. The data set of each project is about 20 TIB to 70 TIB. Median calculation 200 plus or times 45 TIB, which is equal to 9,000 TIB. We plan to make 6 replicas in the world, so we need 50 PIB quota. And according to our current business situation, the new increment of our data set every quarter is 500 TIB. So there is a 95% public data sets. 95% of the programs produced by us have been publicly broadcast on TV stations or network platforms, so it is allowed it to be publicly searched. The 5% encrypted data set, 5% encrypted data sets are mainly shooting tidbits and projects that have not been aired publicly, involving commercial copyright and star privacy, so they need to be encrypted. If notaries need to check, they need to sign a confidentiality agreement, and then they can check, but they are not allowed it to spread. Real. So if anything, you want to ask, if you want to support our project or provide us with the storage services, here is about copyright, existing storage scheme of data set, or about SP selections, please contact with us, xinyuzhu@xcmedia.cn. Thanks for listening.
Awesome. That was a really clear presentation. Thank you so much to the team that made it and submitted it. They have a data cap application up right now. So if you're a notary watching this recording or on the call right now, chat through and see. Really good presentation. Thank you so much for uploading it in time and making sure that we were able to see it. Now we've got a couple minutes left. I'm going to hand the plate back to RG. RG, I know you had some updates you wanted to share from the trust and transparency standpoint. So go for it. I'm going to drop this in chat again as a final reminder to those that are here. Please fill this out on your way out.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So this is just a reminder and flag that moving forward, any LDN applications or concerns or updates will be shared in the working group calls. We decided to do this one here because we won't be able to have the next working group call next week because of FIL Lisbon. But so if there are any applications that you want to provide more information on, or if a community member has a concern about an application, please bring them to the Trust and Transparency Working Group. There's a channel on Slack called FIL Plus, like Trust Working Group. Let me drop the link to that here. Feel free to join that one. And then moving forward, we are also looking for, we're always looking for folks to contribute to LDN issues and kind of add value from a community perspective. So yeah, just wanted to flag that here.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, we've got 1 minute to spare. I think we got through everything pretty much. Takeaways for you if you're watching this or you're here right now. Look at issue number 628 and 630 in the governance repo for the election process. Look at issue 625 for changes to client applications. Check out large data sets number 1051 through, I think, 1059 or whatever the numbers are for the client whose presentation we just watched. Ask any questions you have in Slack or GitHub. And if you're going to join us in person in Lisbon, make sure you register for the events. If you're going to join us, if you're not able to make it to Lisbon, then plan to join us anyway online on October 30th, 9 a.m. On Central European, I think, or maybe 1-, I'm not sure. We'll update you soon. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you all. Looking forward to seeing you either later today or at a future call. Good luck. Take care. Be safe.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Well, hello. Good morning, good evening. Welcome to the second Notary Governance Call of October 18th. We have a pretty full agenda, so let's take a look at a very high level what we have on deck. We're going to start with just a quick housekeeping, how we check in for SLAs on this call, reintroduce you to the governance team. Then we're going to spend a little bit more of this time on the notary elections that are coming up. We're going to highlight some of the changes to the SLAs. We're going to go over how you actually submit an application, a few of the common questions that have been coming in, as well as any time that you may have to kind of ask anything, and then obviously review the timeline for upcoming. We have 2 new proposals, so we'll be taking a look at those 2 new proposals that came in. And with a few minutes left at the end, we'll open it up if anybody has any unscheduled items that weren't put on the agenda. Then we also have an application review submitted. So they've recorded a demo. And if you're on this call right now and you'd like to speak to that, we're looking forward to hearing from you. So with that, let's take a look at what we have on deck. Very friendly hello. This is your new and updated, much larger governance team, as you can see. So Deep, Galen, and myself and RG, we've been with you for a few weeks, months, and years now. But you may see 2 new faces if this is your first time on the call in a while, and that's Phil and Simon. Phil is leading up our notary tooling, so getting a lot of our new applications up and running like the leaderboard. And Simon's working on special projects related to client onboarding, how to make that process smoother and just a little bit more sustainable as we continue to grow. So we're all available on Slack. You may see us answering some of your questions on GitHub, but just as a friendly check-in, we're the ones that make sure you have what you need. If you're on the call right now and you're representing an organization, or you're going to ask a question, or you may want to follow up later in the application for a notary election coming up, it's really nice if we know who you are. So on this call right now, there's a lot of first names, myself included. If you click on yourself in the Zoom image, you can then change your name. So right now I can change it from Kevin to Kevin FF, and now you all know which organization I'm representing on the call. If you take a minute and do this, it makes it a lot easier when we're answering questions for you, and also following up on any recordings getting back. If you're on this call right now and you're part of the notary group, or you're going to apply to be a notary, one of the ways that we track SLA and we track like engagement is looking back on these governance calls, who comes, who talks, who participates. So the way that we track that is with this Airtable link. I'm going to drop this right here in chat for you, and just go ahead and fill this out. And this lets us know who is on the call, who you are representing, and this is going to count towards that SLA for the future on it. And we'll talk about that a lot on this call as we go forward as well. So now that those housekeeping are out of the way, you know who we are, we know who you are, and you signed in to get your credit for coming to class tonight, as they would say. Let's take a look at the notary elections, because this is one of the larger topics that we have on deck to discuss tonight. So as I said, we're going to really start out with like the principles of what we're looking for in notaries and some of the metrics for success that we've seen. We'll talk about the third round in elections, like how do we measure the engagement and SLA from members of the community? What worked, what didn't, how can we improve it? And then we'll introduce you to one of the proposals, actually 2 of the proposals with the election, the first around the SLA, the second around the application that gets processed. So what I'll do is I'll walk through these slides. And before we get to the end of the call, after we do the general timeline, I'll open it up. So if you have questions about the election, this would be a great time to field it, and then we'll kind of talk about next steps. So what are we looking for in the notaries? We've kind of broken this down in the past, and Deep did a really good job putting this list together that I just pirated. And these are the principles that the notaries are essentially bringing to the table. As a notary, what the main role is ensuring that there's a governance around the whole process. And that means like adding to the transparency and accountability of these applications, making sure that it fact checks, that it's a real, that it passes that due diligence that you would do as a notary by reviewing that and accessing the data. And that trust that comes from that transparency is earned over time, that third pillar, which means the more that we work with you, the more that you participate in the community, the easier it is to kind of like essentially work together. So we're looking for notaries that are actually reviewing that transparency project, and that's essentially what RG is leading, and then adding that trust. When we get that trust put in, that adds to this decentralization and diversity of projects. So right now we have notaries broken up by geographic regions. As we grow, as we scale, we'll be looking for like more specialization. So these are like individuals that might know aerospace or might know biotech or might know like data storage on another platform. So that diversity that comes is really important to us in these applications of notaries, not just where you are, but like, what do you really know and specialize in? And then that leads to like that low cost dispute resolution. So essentially, if we do have a problem, how do we voice it as a community? How do we communicate with each other in a fair and respectful way, but also in a transparent way so that everything's out in the open, and then we can kind of flag this as like a true governance community as we come forward. And the goal of these principles leads to that end result, which is useful storage network, growing the Filecoin to be like the source of truth for high quality data. So when we start talking about like the role of the notary and what we're looking for in like really good notaries, it kind of comes back to this. Are you transparent? Have you earned trust with the community and governance team over time? Do you represent like a diverse background coming from it? And then are you participating in this dispute resolution in a low cost, respectful way, flagging issues for the team, and then continually helping to bring on that quality data? So with that, the way that we've kind of looked at the participation of notaries in the third round worked by what you see right here. We set up an SLA. It was a new proposal in the third election. And what it was designed to do was kind of have some unit of measurement for how notaries are participating in the Filecoin Plus program. The way that we based it off of was strictly hours. So it wasn't like a qualitative, it was just quantitative, which meant if somebody was issuing a vote on a proposal or if somebody was coming to these meetings, we viewed that as like, great, this is wonderful, thank you very much. And then the intent was to have a leaderboard set up where you could essentially see yourself as a notary ranked against the other notaries in the program, which meant if you were coming to the governance calls, if you were voting on proposals, if you were answering common questions in Slack that were raised from newer members of the community, that would elevate you in the leaderboard. And then we add on to that the time to first response in a GitHub issue, or the time to actually issuing that when you've been pinged in GitHub. What was really nice about that model is that it gave notaries a way to participate in the program just aside from signing data cap over and over and over again. It also helped elevate a lot of the newer notaries to like, hey, what are some of my roles that I should be doing? How do I participate in Slack? How am I signing these applications? Really going back and forth. But as you see in those two bubbles right there, there were two problems. The first was we didn't get the leaderboard up in time to really kind of have a unit of measurement where notaries could say, well, I've come to a few of the governance calls, but compared to my peers, I'm really missing out. Or I've responded to a few of the proposals, or I answer in GitHub in this time. But there was really no way to kind of have a standard where like, hey, the community overall is based off this. So what ended up happening is a lot of our SLA for the third round that we looked at that I've been pulling, it's overly biased into coming to governance calls, being on Slack, but it really doesn't have a lot of like that giving back, like what kind of working groups, what are we looking like on your applications? So what we're proposed is a new way to measure SLA, that standard level agreement, service level agreement, excuse me, in this coming fourth round. So for that, you're going to see a new issue. It's right here, number 630. I'll drop it in chat. And what this is doing is pulling exactly what we're looking for as far as like activities into like more defined proposals on like what a good response would look like. So you can think about this in two categories. Category one would be like an awareness level notary. This might be someone who's newer to the program. This might be somebody that just wants to only be involved on a very tactical level or not super mega engaged. And as you can see, that kind of falls into 3 L's. And these all come off the same scoring sheet, the same L rating that we've used, and we'll talk about that. And so an L1 is someone who would come to the governance call around once a month. They're in Slack, they're responding to issues in Slack, and they're checking the data cap allocations that go through. And they're coming to vote about once a month on a proposal that would come in. I would call that like the bare minimum, is someone who's just approving the data, coming every so often to stay connected, and then really going forward on that one. The L2 is a lot more involved, just one step up. So they're still coming to a governance call. They're still responding to Slack, and they're still commenting and voting on proposals. But the new addition to get more points on that scoring will be joining a working group. And a good example of these working groups is the one like RG is leading with Trust and Transparency, or Kevin Z with the FIL Plus proposals. And what this is meant to do is almost like joining a club while you're in university, just kind of taking that +1 on the engagement, trying to make it better. And as you see on L3, it has all those same steps of L1 and L2, but the new addition is maintaining a percentage on the leaderboard. We expect that leaderboard to launch now that we have Phil's help. And that leaderboard will essentially stack rank all participation, all time to data cap, all allocations of data that go through. And so if you're agreeing to commit to that higher level for a higher score, the expectation is that you're in that upper 75% of participating notaries. So when we get this leaderboard launched, the expectation is if you say you're going to invest this time, you're also committing to, you're going to make sure that you're like locking in your score and try to just get those points and just try to be the best notary you can. L4 and L5, what we call are like just principals, are essentially stepping into almost like leadership roles, stewards of the program as they start to work this. So you can see that the requirements go up for a higher score in this field. To receive a 4, if you're committing to a 4 in your notary application, you're saying that you're going to come to both governance calls a month. Ideally, if there's 2 in a month, you'll be here as a consistent presence and voice and picking this up. That you'll join 2 working groups, ideally. This won't be a hard requirement, but it's an ideal. So you'll be a member of 1 or 2 working groups, really contributing, participating, giving feedback, getting back to Slack questions in around 2 days. It doesn't have to be a hard 48 hours, but around 2 days, which means you're reachable. If there's a block or a question or an issue, we can count on you to get back to us if we have anything that we're curious about. And then you're voting and commenting on around 2 proposals. And then on average, we have about 10 to 15 proposals a month. So it's not like it's a huge number, but the big jump when you come up to this is you're in the top 10% of notaries. You're allocating data, you're responding quickly to GitHub and Slack for issues that come in, and that really gives you an increased number on your score. Then lastly is an L5. So if you want the maximum points on your notary application, what you commit to as an L5 is like obviously in the top 5%. So you're in the A+ of notaries, really coming to calls, really participating. The big highlight that we have for L5 is having things like turning on your webcam on this call. May seem like a small detail, but it goes a long way to kind of build that trust and transparency that we talked about as principles. So these little initiations are like how we're trying to measure the SLA. So rather than just being pure time, looking at it from a more like benchmark standard. So before I move on to like how this has changed or some of the other applications, I'm going to pause and see if anybody has any questions or like to talk about some of these proposals in this new SLA for the 4th.
So I have a question. Hi, this is Linda from BY Technology. Can I ask one question? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Kevin. Like I reviewed the these new points for the proposal for the notary elections, as we are sub SP, but we are going to apply for the elections of the notary. So we are newcomer as a notary, and all these standards are for, I think it's for the senior ones, right? Not for new notary, right? Because as a new notary, we have no such kind of experience like to present the proposals, things like that. So did that make sense to you? And I'm not, yeah.
Such a good question. Thank you for asking that. So I wouldn't necessarily say that you are discouraged from applying for some of these higher level scores. To kind of put it into context, last time, going back one slide, we based it off hours. So the question I would ask you when you're thinking about your involvement in this is, how many hours do you think you'll be investing in a week? If you think that you're going to be around 30 minutes, then 1 hour, or excuse me, 30 minutes, like an L1 makes a lot of sense. If you think about this as a newer notary stepping in, you really want to get involved in this and you really want to make a name for yourself and your organization, a good way to think about it is, if you plan to spend around 8 hours or more than 8 hours, just because you're new doesn't mean that you can't apply for these like L4s and L5s. But the expectation will be, if you're committing to invest 8 hours a week or more than 8 hours a week, these are some of the things that you should be doing. So it's not like you're going to have to submit a proposal. These are just vote and comment on the proposal. There's no requirement to submit. So really the question is, we're still looking at it from a time perspective, but just what are you doing with that time while you're in the program is a good way to look at it. Do you have any follow-ups to that?
Oh, understood. Thank you, Kevin. So that's our commitment. Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Oh, and you. All right. Well, if anybody has any questions, we'll have time as we keep going. So I appreciate it.
And one thing to that, right?
Please.
Just for those of you watching this recording later too, right? This is part of a cycle of elections. We're at this point where elections are an inflection point for the community. You go through this process, you're getting elected, you serve as a notary for a period of time, several months. So though this might look daunting, there's reason, you know, the L4, L5 requirements are high. We're not expecting everybody to just say that they're ready to do that. But you have a lot of time to build up to this too. You have our support. We're building teams to ensure that this is all realistic and feasible. And so please don't view this as like a particularly scary thing. And I completely agree with Gary that it's just a more defined way of like a proxy for how much time, how much dedication are you going to be able to give towards the program. Looks like we got a question.
Hey, it's Sunny, and I am showing my video partly to go up the ladder and partly because I'm eating and I didn't want you to see that. So I guess my question is, what do you have any kind of anticipation as to how many notaries you want in each of these buckets? I'm sort of looking at them and I'm wondering, like, you know, will there be 2 or 3 L5s? Do you expect, you know, most people to be L1s? I know that won't compare to what actually happens, but do you have any idea of what you're aspiring to?
Maybe I go first and I pass it to Deep and RG for their thoughts. I'd love to live in a world and be on a program where everybody was L5, like came into this like, yeah, we're doing something that's awesome. There's no ranking like we do with geographic, where we're only going to take a certain number on this one. Obviously, if you are a newer notary applicant and you may not be as strong in like past performance or influence on network in the past, but you have time, you have grit, and you really want to get involved, this is a way that you can really say, like, on your application, look, I plan to spend a few hours a week, and this is a good way to break it down. So no numbers, but that's a really good question. Deep, do you have any build on that?
I think ultimately, Danny, like this is also, we're asking this upfront, right? This is more like you're attempting to commit to doing this, which also means that like some of these things, especially the percentages, we won't know till it happens, till we start tracking, till we see where people actually end up. And so, yeah, just a proxy for commitment. doubling down on what Kerry said, would love to see a world where everybody participates as an L5. Just want to highlight that we do expect people to be a little realistic about this. Like, if you are way off base in what you claim versus what you end up delivering, that will impact, future elections and impact your reputation as a notary. So please do try to right size this for yourself, knowing that you're going to fall, +1, -1 in like the real world scenarios that happen.
And just kind of, I think just building on that, I think that because this is the first time we're piloting this, and I think we want to, of course, see, how many applications we get for notaries. And I think I personally expect that we might see more on the awareness front and the leader front, because I think we've had a few rounds of elections before. Just, to be like, and the community knows this, that notary engagement, a lot of notaries have not been as engaged as they committed to be. I can speak from like a trust and transparency perspective, where earlier this year when we raised an issue saying that, hey, notaries should be doing more due diligence, there was like some conversation about, hey, like, I don't know if notaries should be like going to that extent, but then we all the notary applications are up on GitHub, and a lot of notaries have had like a very detailed outline of what they promised to do. And so I think, of course, we want people to promise and deliver as well. So I personally would like to see more folks kind of starting at L1, L2, L3, and then eventually moving up there, instead of, having a lot of L4, L5s and having the same issues that we have had so far.
Yeah, great point, RG. Thank you. If anyone still has questions, we're still going to have plenty of time kind of carrying on with this topic. The next is just a quick reminder in case this is your first time applying. The way to do so is to go to the Notary Governance repo inside of GitHub. When you come over to issues, you can then make a new issue called Notary Application. We'll be modifying this form in the coming days once these proposals have time to get comments or feedback. And then once those have sat and received a fair number of comments, feedback, or been open, we'll go ahead and update the form. So once that form is updated, when the application window is open, that's when you follow this link and you submit an application. And essentially what that application is, like who you are, where you come from, why you want to be a notary, how are you invested in the program. Then we collect these, we score those based off the rubric that we've shared in past tickets, and we're going to talk about going forward. And then it's just a mathematical score based off participation, based off what you're bringing, based off past involvement. So just as a quick reminder, that's how the application process works. And we'll be showing more links on this as it gets closer. But if you want to start to get a feel for it, that's where it is. We have one more application change that came through, number 628, and I'll drop the link here in chat. Deep, would you like to speak to this one, bud?
Yeah, I think if Phil isn't here, I'll happily speak to it. So the intent behind 628 is basically to capture a list of several changes that we think are going to be useful to make the application template overall. The application template in many ways tends to follow the rubric. And in the past, what we've seen is that the rubric drives the changes and the application template follows to ensure the right questions are being asked. This time, we're sort of proposing a slightly different take where the application itself serves as like a first-class asset in the Filecoin Plus election process for notaries and can be used as a lever for future innovation, improves like the clarity of the experience, improves the efficiency in the system, as well as sort of generally provides scaffolding and building blocks of future experiments so that we can continue increasing the rate at which we grow the program and experiment within the program. And so this particular set of changes primarily has four change motivations. We really want to improve the clarity of the questions. We want to improve the efficiency and make sure the process happens faster, which means you understand what we're asking of you. We understand what you're telling us in an application. And then when there's follow-ups, they're more effective because it's clear what the application is seeking to establish. As I mentioned, setting up for future evolution, and then housekeeping. So as the ecosystem has evolved and the program has evolved, the application template also needs to stay caught up. So like little things like instead of minor IDs, referring to them as storage provider IDs is an example of that kind of change. And so there's like a lot of changes. There's I think 8 sections that have been impacted with pretty substantive changes in some of them. In the morning call, we actually ran through all of the changes. So there's a recording of Phil running through each one. I think in sort of the sparing those of you watching the recording, I'm just going to go through briefly some of the key changes. And then I think the rest I will leave to the reader to pop open the actual application. The application template change proposal, which is issued 628, and you can take a look there. So the main stuff I want to call out is we're looking to add country of operation in addition to region. This improves the fidelity of information available about each notary, could unlock some really interesting scenarios in the future of like matching clients to notaries to get data cap distributed more efficiently and effectively, and could help us experiment with how we're doing regional distribution better in the future and lend itself to stronger decentralization in the community. There's a couple of questions that are just catching up to the state of the world. That includes like, stronger set of use cases that we want to have people opt into, that they want to support. Take a look and make sure that like you think it's comprehensive and it's useful. Change 1F is a new question where we're asking if you're applying on behalf of yourself or an organization. This is going to be tremendously helpful in like key change down the line. Specifically, we've had a couple of cases where individuals have rotated at organizations or individuals have left organizations, and sometimes it's not super clear. This way, we have extreme clarity in the application up front, where the organization would retain the notary address, or the address might roll to a different individual at that organization, or it's that the individual is leaving with the notary hood effectively. And that also influences how we measure then and score that person as an applicant, because if you're applying as an individual, then it's your fill at stake, it's your reputation, it's what you bring to the table. And if you're applying as an organization, it's your organization's fill at stake, your organization's reputation in the ecosystem, and you just as a representative of that organization. And so this is a very, very important clarification that I think will help Kere a lot sleep a little bit more at night, and also in general improve the clarity of the different types of roles and stakeholders that we have represented in the overall community. A couple more sort of updates and minor clarifications. I want to call out number 4. So actually, I'd also like to call out number 3B. So in 3B, we talk about, how much fill do you have at stake? And this is a measure of long-term network alignment. In addition to just asking how much, there's a clarifying question on how did you acquire the fill cited above? And so what we're really looking for here is people to talk about whether or not it's an investment, whether or not they're running a storage provider, and that's just how they earn revenue and fill, or if they've received a grant or they went and bought it in the open market. This will start to influence notary incentive design in the long term. Like, it's a very good data point as we think about future mechanisms where we can leverage the FEM, leverage smart contracts, leverage incentive mechanisms in crypto to start to design better skin in the game constructs for notaries. Like, a lot of you have seen that we've thrown around ideas like this, and this will be very, very strong data to help us start to architect this stuff. And hopefully for those of you that are observers in the community, you can start to see some of the patterns and practices of notaries that are being elected, and where they come from and what their backgrounds are and their ability to be a incentive aligned fiduciary of this network. Number 4, we added an additional question on reputation for individuals. So because we split up individual and organization a little bit more, we wanted to ensure that there were more questions for the individual applicant as well to sort of help them build a strong case for their reputation. Question number 7, we ended up removing, change number 7, we ended up removing the question of how much data cap have you allocated. It's because this is trivial. We can collect this in dashboards. Similar to this change, there's also the deletion of the overall diversity and decentralization question section in change 5. That's because we're collecting that in core information up front. And the last thing I want to call out is we're starting to introduce we're proposing introducing a disclosure section at the bottom of the application template. So this is sort of upfront, what are the disclosures that we can start asking for that, again, ease that transition, ease that movement into becoming a notary, reduce the burden of the onboarding process. This particular question is, do you or your organization have any relationships with other existing notaries or their organizations? This is because, as you may have seen, we had this case where there were a group of organizations that were all somewhat related and were funded by the same entity, and they were all applying together. And then we went through this massive sort of process of like disentangling the relationships between them and figuring out a model that would work. In essence, this is basically not to discourage people to apply if they work from related organizations. We would love to have multiple notaries that are associated or work in associated organizations, but them then having the rights to unilaterally make decisions is dangerous, right? So if you end up having 4 notaries that are ultimately funded by the same person or the same organization, they now have the ability between them to sign infinite amounts of data cap via like the LDN v3 to a new client. And so in those cases, we can start to build tooling that says, hey, if if notary A and notary B are linked, then notary A and notary B shouldn't sign the same allocation. Like they shouldn't be part of the same accept proposal pair messages. And so we can start to introduce more fairness and introduce better sort of tracking of potential sources of abuse. And so this is one of the questions similar to like, just telling us up front, what are the SPIDs that you're associated with? One thing that's coming to mind as I'm speaking about this out loud, Kira, is that we, and RG actually to you as well, is that we may want to propose saying, not just existing notaries, but also applying notaries. Like this is a little bit harder to track down because it depends on, suppose you have a set of new notaries that are all applying at the same time. Right now, they wouldn't be able to say anything in this part of the application process, basically. And so at least we should include, existing or applying notaries to the best of your knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to hear if there are any thoughts on this or anything you want to add on.
Yeah, well, not so much of a thought, but I would definitely encourage everyone here and anyone watching recording to please contribute to this. We don't want this to be just like a guideline coming from the governance team. This is really a proposal, and we would love your input. So please engage on GitHub and yeah.
I'll open it up if anybody on the line has any questions.
Just one question, sorry, still me, Linda. Because I just reviewed the one point and mentioned the operation size, right? Operation country of operation. So I may have a confuse for this point. The country of operation means where the SP located, I mean the hardware located, or the registered country.
No, this would be where the individual acting as a notary is located. So in your case, it could be where if Linda, if you are applying to be the notary on behalf of the SP organization, then it's where you are. If the organization is applying broadly, then it's where the organization is operating, not necessarily where it's registered. Where it's registered is not that useful to us because ultimately the point of knowing about the country is because it helps us match up applicants for data cap to notaries, which means you understand the language, you understand the culture, you understand the cultural nuances. You're able to go above and beyond GitHub to build a strong relationship with the client to identify if they're trustworthy. And so where you're registered is not a useful indicator of that. A lot of people here register to optimize for tax or geopolitical boundary optimization. And that's fine. We respect that. That makes sense. But really what we're trying to get out of this is where are you operating your business, or where are you personally located, so that we know that we can send clients from that region to you for your review.
Okay, maybe BWell's situation is like this. We have the like hardware sites and on Hong Kong, Singapore, and many other countries in future. But my personal life, I stay in Australia. So this kind of situation should belong to. So when I register, when I fill in the form, I should write Australia or Asian. So
I think if you are going to be, this is a really interesting question. RG, do you want to add anything before I? Yeah.
No, I was just gonna I was gonna build on this, but you can finish it and I can yeah.
Well, so I think, Linda, that's a really good question and a very good point. And it ends up depending on if you're going to be applying as Linda or applying as BWell, I think. And so I think it comes down to in this case, you're talking about applying as BWell. BWell is based in Hong Kong and in Singapore, you said. And then you're personally based in Australia. In the case that BWell moves, they say Linda leaves her job, or they say somebody else will also be a notary. Would the person that it would go to be based in either Hong Kong or Singapore?
In Asian, yeah, Singapore or Hong Kong.
Then I would then go with the place where your business has a larger footprint or has a headquarters where there are more employees, so it's more likely to be represented in that region. And if the answer is truly that you're a completely distributed organization, then I would start out by actually saying that you're applying from Australia, probably, because that's you as an individual understanding the Australian culture and the Australian norms. And then that means we may have to update the location if we ever change the notary from BeWell. But I think the default answer should likely be where the majority of the business is conducted for the organization. RG, what do you think?
I just want to make 2 points. I think one, if it's unclear, please disclose as much information as possible in the application. So you can mention that, I am personally based here, but this is the organization. If ever a conflict comes and someone in the community raises a flag, we can refer to that and say, hey, this individual was as clear as possible. And so I think it becomes easier for the community to give them a benefit of doubt. And there actually have been cases before where, a notary said that they were registered somewhere, but then we eventually found out that they weren't there. And I think that's just like not ideal. So we definitely want to make sure that, I know, everyone's doing remote work, people are moving all the time. And, of course, we don't expect you to update the notary application every time you do that. But at least, as Deep mentioned, you can declare where you are currently, physically, and as well as the organization where it's located, as well as, if possible, you can declare if it's registered in a different place. And that definitely helps us to make decisions, as well as from a trust and transparency perspective, it would feed into the leaderboard.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Arjun.
Hello, everyone. My name is Darlene, and I have a question. One problem that has always puzzled me is that I don't quite understand the specific scoring rules. Sometimes the big items get average score, sometimes they get the highest score. For example, there is a big item with the 3 small points, and the score is 535, but the score of this big item is 5. So how to judge the score?
Yeah, so each of those groups, Darlene, have a dedicated function. So I think you might be talking about the part of the rubric where you look at the actual, I think it's like the due diligence and the bookkeeping plan, right? And how you will be scoring applications. It's like the overall like data cap allocation process section of the rubric. Each section has its own math in the rubric. So I think the best thing for you to do is actually to take a look at the rubric, see the individual formulas for that. I think Phil will be opening up an issue with the changes tomorrow. So I would recommend you take a look at the issue that is opened up tomorrow with the rubric, updated rubric proposal. And in that, you can actually see the math function and how each of the sections is scored. And if it's confusing, please ask us the clarifying questions, and we'll explain to you what it was and what we're proposing the changes to. And if you don't agree with it, then we would love to hear that as well. Because I think it would be very helpful in making sure that we're taking into account additional perspectives and adjusting the proposal accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
These are great questions. I just want to say thanks for raising those, asking. If you ever have any follow-up, feel free to send a DM to myself. But even more ideal is asking in the Fil Plus Slack channel, because I guarantee if you're wondering that, there's multiple people that are wondering that. So any question you have, obviously, if you don't feel comfortable, you can DM me and I'll answer for you. But ask that in the Fil Plus channel, because I guarantee you'll not only get an answer, but you'll connect with people that might be wondering the same thing. So with this, maybe I'll speak deep if you want to add any clarifications on after I'm finished. This is just the applications received will be scored by the levels. So this just feeds into the question that you just asked. So perfect and timely. Each individual category in the application has a scoring rubric. What we do is after we get all the applications submitted, we sit down and we go through line by line and we just kind of tally it up. There's no mystery to it. And whatever category you commit to in these, we just give you the score based off where it ranks. Then we subtotal it by region, and then we get back with the awards for that. So again, if you have any questions on this rubric, feel free to ask. But this is where the issue is right now. And I'll put this slide deck on our Slack channel so that way you have it. And I'll drop this link to this rubric here in chat so that you have a copy of that as well. I'll do that right now. So on that note with FAQs, these are a couple of the DMs that I've gotten in the last couple of days asking about notaries. So the first one is, if you are an existing notary, do you have to reapply? And the short answer is no, but it's highly recommended. The reason for it is when we had notaries that came in the second election and did not reapply for the third, it means that they didn't take part in some of the new KYC. They didn't take part in some of the new levels of commitment. And so what that meant was when there was an issue, a tech upgrade to upgrade everybody onto the LDN v3, these second round notaries had not completed any of the forms and they had not agreed to do continual upgrades on their applications, which meant they were not able to be read on to the LDN v3 and were essentially blocked out of that really nice, convenient way to sign those applications. You also only need to reapply if you're looking to have your data topped off. So if you ask for, like, say, a petabyte and you've already spent half of it, it's probably wise to get that refilled. And it also re-solidifies your place in the community. We are looking to like notaries to stay engaged, stay active. So we would view it, if you weren't reapplying, as like your very subtle, polite way of saying, hey, I think I might be slowly stepping back from this. I don't think I'm looking for more data cap, or I don't want to be read on to new things. So short answer, you do not have to reapply if you're an existing notary, but it's also very strongly recommended to stay active and moving forward in the program. The second one we've got is, hey, I already turned in an application in the GitHub repository. In fact, I did it weeks or months ago. Do I have to do it again? So again, the short answer on this is yes, but not a whole lot. So just like we talked about with the changes to the rubric here with this proposal and this proposal with the SLAs, it's going to change how the application is funneled in GitHub. It'll still be in the same way. You could just modify your existing application with the new changes that came on board. So it won't be like having to start all over again. You're just going to modify a few of the lines with those new changes that we had, provide that new information, then resubmit it. And what I'll do is I'm going to be pulling all of the GitHub applications in the coming days and sending just a quick ping like, hey, we received your application. Looking forward to having you in this next round. Please check back on this new proposal and check your application because there's some new fields for you to fill out. So I'd like to thank the people that DM me with these questions that were okay with me posting it here. Again, if you have any other follow-ups, feel free to send me a DM on Slack or reach out in FIL Plus, and I'll be happy to get back to you. So with the quick time that we have left, we've already posted this slide. So just as a quick check-in, today we're talking about the FAQ on the process. On the 30th call at FIL Lisbon, we're going to get into a lot of detail more about like what the notaries are doing, what we see coming up in 2023, any questions on the applications. Then they open up from the 1st to the 16th. We'll score them until December 9th. Then we'll announce the new set of notaries. So we'll be posting this in Slack if you haven't seen it already, but that's where the timeline stands. So with that, we have one proposal that came through and a very quick update on FIL Lisbon. Then we had a data applicant submit their video for your review. So Deep, if it's okay, would you like to speak with this one from 625, or RG, would you be better suited to talk to this one?
Either way is good. This is a pretty simple change. I can do a brief one and then hand it over to RG if you want to add any more color. But basically, the TLDR here is start asking for applicant country for clients instead of region. This is also in line with the recommended change on notaries applying with information of their country as well. This improves the fidelity of the information that we have about client applications. It helps notaries much better understand where a client is coming from. And oftentimes this data is there in the app anyway. This just levels it up for clarity when people are parsing through the applications and enables us to build better automation around this, both from a governance standpoint, but then also for all those of the people working on dashboards and trust and transparency to scrape that data a little bit better. And so should improve notary efficiency, process efficiency, and improvement in transparency for the program overall. The second part of the proposal is to add an industry. So here the idea is that basically every client should also select what industry their business is in. This is also, again, one of those things which is implied in the application anyway. So it shouldn't increase the burden on a client, but it will drastically improve the quality of the information being collected and the data coming in, and further clarify for participating notaries like what the client is actually about and what they're looking to onboard to the network. Relatively simple changes. They got a decent amount of support in the morning call, and the application changes proposal already has like a decent amount of support on it. So would love to hear if anybody thinks, you know, this would not be a good change, but also in general, if you have any thoughts on it, great time to share them. Archie, is there anything else you want to add from a trust and transparency standpoint?
Not really. I think one thing I just wanted to flag is, moving forward, any concerns regarding trust and transparency, including application reviews, will be done at the working group calls for TNT. And so I know we have one coming up today. The reason we'll be doing it today here is we won't be able to have that call next week because of FIL Lisbon. But yeah, if you have any concerns as a community member about an application, please post them there. Or if you're a client or an SP looking to unblock one of the LDNs, please post them there. That's probably the best way. We are trying to optimize and make the FIL process overall and these governance calls better. And so that helps in that process.
All right, thank you. Quick check-in, FIL Lisbon coming up, my goodness, in a week and a half, time flies. There is going to be a FIL Plus Day. We call it a symposium. It's going to take place on October 30th from 09 to 1300. I apologize, that time is Lisbon time. I don't have it translated for UTC. I'm going to be posting the schedule and the sign up in the chat. Right now, we do not have a vendor locked down for live stream, which means that the conference will probably be recorded and posted shortly after, probably within the day or so online. If you're able to attend live, please message me. We'd love to have you. I've been sending out DMs to folks. We're going to have meetups. We're going to have an event. So just as a quick reminder, FIL Lisbon coming up on the 30th. We're going to record the sessions just in case it's not technically able to be live streamed. And that'll address a lot of the questions on the notary applications, everything coming up for the election.
I may have lied in the morning call by saying that we're probably going to have this live stream. So if you're watching the recording and you're confused, K-Ray knows the truth. I was guessing.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of recording demand in that conference because of ETH. Sweet. We have a video to play for the data applicant, but I'd like to allocate just 2 or 3 minutes if there was any remaining questions on some of the topics before we move on.
Will the Brisbane meeting available online or just offline?
I'm sorry, Linda, which available offline or online?
I mean, the meeting on 30th November, October 30th?
30th will be a live, yeah, it'll be a live conference in Lisbon, and we're going to record it and then post it to YouTube the next day.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
Good question. Thanks for that. All right, then we'll let the video speak for you. So essentially, as a reminder, if someone has submitted an LDN application and they'd like to get more information out or see if they can do to move it through the process as fast as possible, rather than attend live, we ask them to just record a short video describing themselves, their organization, and their project. And then we try to voice it and give it an elevated vote here on these calls. We don't always have time to play the videos, but tonight we do. And so I'm going to play their video right now.
Hello, everyone. This is Change Media, which is committed to becoming the most professional and high-quality video content production company. There are 5 business segments in there. 1, film, TV, play investment and post-production. 2, post-production training, short video production for TikTok. 3, investment and production of TV programs. 4, post-production of a variety show. And last, music arrangement and composition services, film and television dubbing, and program mixing. In this decade, there were 115 cooperation projects between Change Media and TV stations, and then 87 cooperation projects with network platforms, which are very rare in China. There are 5 development teams, 6 project production teams, and 12 executive director teams. Through long-term project practical experience, the team now has professional programs, content, R&D capability, and rich project execution and production experience. The programs produced by Change Media have more than 50 billion hits in Chinese internet. As the main business segment of Change Media, the company is located in Beijing and Changsha. More than 170 content producers have the ability and the quality to produce the 5 S-level variety shows at the same time. There are 5 shows on 10 billion playing back volume data set, including Running Man China, Use With You, Where Are We Going, Dad? The Story in China, Nation's Greatest Treasures. The data set of each project is about 20 TIB to 70 TIB. Median calculation 200 plus or times 45 TIB, which is equal to 9,000 TIB. We plan to make 6 replicas in the world, so we need 50 PIB quota. And according to our current business situation, the new increment of our data set at every quarter is 500 TIB. So there is a 95% public data sets. 95% of the programs produced by us have been publicly broadcast on TV stations or network platforms, so it is allowed it to be publicly searched. The 5% encrypted data set, 5% encrypted data sets are mainly shooting tidbits and projects that have not been aired publicly, involving commercial copyright and star privacy, so they need to be encrypted. If notaries need to check, they need to sign a confidentiality agreement, and then they can check, but they are not allowed it to spread. For real. So if anything, you want to ask if you want to support our project or provide us with the storage services, here is about copyright, existing storage scheme of data set, or about SP selections, please contact with us, xinyuzhu@xcmedia.cn. Thanks for listening.
Well, I appreciate them putting that video together, kind of explaining why they're asking for the data, what they're looking for. In the slide deck that goes out, this will all be included, as well as this was posted to the FIL application review. If you are a notary and keen to look at this and sign off, that's waiting for you. We have 1 minute left, so rather than turning it over for questions, I'd like to just thank you for your time. Any questions, please hit us up on Slack or in the FIL Plus channel or an application review. and we'll be happy to get back. And I will link this public slide deck shortly and post the videos to YouTube. So thank you all that came to this new time. It was great to see so many faces on the call, and looking forward to the next call, which will be taking place at FIL Lisbon coming up in a week and a half. All the best.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.